Howdy y'all, this is Jacob Carter at Cottonclad Comics, the sole proprietor, owner, illustrator, writer, one-man show that is Cottonclad Comics. I'm releasing a video earlier than my next planned installment, which is comic strip reviews, because I was recently inspired by a gentleman who runs the Cirque Works YouTube video channel, who he provides a variety of topics on comics, not comic strips per se, but comics generally. And he had some very interesting art tips and techniques, as well as advice for other people who are trying to get up, the steam to produce and create and really try and make something out of their work. So one of his videos was on how to hold yourself accountable. But he says something very interesting in there. He said, what are his goals for the year in terms of creation and production? Because, of course, holding yourself accountable is important in every aspect of life. If you're passionate about something, and we are passionate about art, just speaking of people generally, not necessarily only myself, but, there are a lot of people out there who love making comics. They want to hold themselves accountable to produce work, especially if they don't do it professionally. If they're hobbyists or they just do it on the side and so forth, it sometimes can be very daunting to try and find the time, of course, to do something. And that's true with, any aspect of life. You have your day job and you come home and then you do what you really enjoy. Some people would say that. Not to say I don't enjoy my day job, but, it seems like that's most people in life. They spend time during the day in order to do what they want in the evenings and in the mornings and so forth. But he gives some advice about how to hold yourself accountable. And that is that you want to make public declarations of your goals. Now, this is interesting because usually most of us just like to spring our ideas on the public without too much build-up and so forth, especially if you don't have a following. It seems a little narcissistic in order to say, well, I'm creating this, I'm creating that, because you're basically speaking to nobody. Not that the people who watch are nobodies. You don't want to insult the people who actually do enjoy the content, or even if they don't enjoy the content, they're just trying to support you in that way or other ways by viewing. But in the relative scheme of things, it's a very small portion of people. So if you're speaking to 5 or 6 viewers and you're saying, this is what I'm planning to do, these are my ideas, it can seem a little self-indulgent because, it's clear that there's not a market for your material, at least yet. So it's more like you're doing it for your own enjoyment rather than because of the demand of actual audiences. But you have to start somewhere. So that's what I'm doing currently. And again, the people who watch the videos, thank you so much. It's fun to create. That's the primary reason I do it, is, of course, for my own amusement. But, of course, having other people look at your work is always much more satisfying in the long run. If you can make somebody smile, then you've done a good job at life. Depending on what type of smile it is, I guess. If it's a wicked grin, then that may not be the best use of your life. But so public declaration of goals. So my goals are currently, regarding this channel specifically, which again is in a very rough state, it's to put out a video a month reviewing comic strips. There are thousands upon thousands of persons who do other comic books, floppy comics and so forth, mini comics and everything like that. There are very few people who seemingly do comic strips. So I would like to confine myself to comic strips because comic strips are what I enjoy doing the most. It's what I enjoy reading the most. And it's such a fun field, a fun, neglected, and sadly dying field. Again, webcomics have kind of revived the comic strip in a little way. But even most of those are digital productions. They don't use the traditional techniques and so forth, which is what we're really trying to do here, or what I'm trying to do here. But anyway, public declaration of goals. It's not the new year. The new year has passed us by, unless, interestingly enough, March 25th in the English calendar, from about the 12th century to the mid-18th century, that was actually the date of the legal New Year. So if you were in England between those two periods, or within that period between those two times, the 12th century and what did I say, 18th century, then that would be the start of the legal New Year, which is interesting. Now, very important, of course, to the West, to Christians specifically, because it's the Feast of the Annunciation. But if we use that as a measurement, then we haven't missed the New Year by too much. So we're close. And of course, Easter is coming up, and Easter is wildly important feast, and just a wildly important day. Even if you're a secularly minded person, it's still a very important date. But it's, the day of resurrection, truly the day of rebirth in some ways. So what better time to, plug an idea or to look forward to new goals and new heights than Easter, when humanity is elevated to a new height in some ways. So my goals for the coming year. So I guess I'll do Easter to Easter, or Easter to, January 1st, 2023. So currently the number one goal is probably to, and I've neglected this too often, to finish the Holy Hunchback. I have been continuing to draw it and ink it while I have been posting Retropolis, but I would like to, of course, wrap that up this year. I think I should be able to do it. I'm hopeful, even if I post once a week, which is, usually my goal. I'm going to try and double that up, maybe in the next few months. But once a week, that should give me plenty of time in order to round out the series, which will hopefully be about 50 strips, which translates to, I think, like a 22-page book if you do, how I set it up. But I'm going to try and aim for about 50 strips there, 50 or 60 strips there, which is about what the snake was. So that's the number one goal. Finish the Holy Hunchback. It's a more devotional piece, so it's a little more daunting, serious subject matter, but it's fun. I'm happy to do it. Hopefully it holds up. Second goal is to get Retropolis colored, either myself or get somebody else to do it. See if anybody would be interested in doing that. It should be relatively easy to color because it's just very simple line art. If I had the time, I'd probably do it myself, though I'm not very good with colors. Colors are very difficult, be they digital or traditional. The third is to work on Inkapade. So Inkapade is going to be comic books, not comic strips, but actual comic books. I kicked around the idea of having it to be like actually a newspaper comic publication where other people could submit their comic strips and we could publish it, quarterly was what my hopes were. And, with the variety of topics, you could have adventure strips and funny strips and everything else. And that would basically be like a newsletter we issue quarterly with all these different people's comic strips who want to contribute. Problem is, it's a one-man show with me alone. I don't know that too many people who do comic strips. There would probably be a lot of, legal issues involved with using somebody else's works, even if they were, wanted to contribute. So that's a little more of a daunting. So that's a little more of an involved task than what I'm prepared to do right now. I would definitely love to do that in the future. Again, a black and white simple newsletter with a variety of comic strips issued quarterly. That would be a lot of fun. They probably would have to be one-off comics or kind of Sunday-type comics, due to the fact that they're only coming out 4 times a year. But that's something I would really like to work on. But Inkapade is going to be devoted to my own work in comic book form. So currently I'm going to try and divide it up by themes. So it's going to be an anthology of stories, and I'm going to do 2 stories per issue centered around a particular theme. And when I say theme, a better word would probably be genre. So the first one is going to be science fiction. So I'll have 2 stories, one of which dates from 2015. So, we're approaching 7 years on that one coming up here. And that one's called Castled. And I actually had 3 drafted pages. I did way back when, 2015, which I'm going to revamp and carry out the story and continue it. And I almost forgot I'd even had this idea on hand. But it should be fun. It's supposed to have a very retro style to it. It'll be, a good departure from everything else I've been working on. Hopefully it'll come across as being fresh and fun. And the second comic I'm going to do within that anthology, I don't actually have a name for yet. It's written out, it's drawn out. I've done most of the inking involved, but I have not yet chosen a name for it. And currently I just call it Space Paladin or the Sci-Fi or Denora. Those are the placeholder names until I can actually get a good name for it. But these are two separate stories in this one anthology. And both of them will be in black and white. And these aren't necessarily in the same universe. But it should be fun. Now with Inkapade, I'm going to plan on doing this probably annually. But I was able to actually whip out the Denora story, draw it out actually, relatively quickly. It even surprised me. So maybe I could keep that momentum up and switch it to something else. But currently, Inkapade's first issue is going to be, again, a science fiction genre or theme. The second issue, I think I'm going to do a little bit of fantasy there. I debated whether or not to put in another idea I have into the first issue, Rooster Ritter. Ritter is a German word for knight. So this story is Rooster Ritter, and it is about a rooster who is also a knight. He is a rooster knight. Because roosters are very noble creatures. Everybody makes fun of chickens, but there are very few animals like a rooster which will fight to the death with a creature much larger than itself in order to defend those things around it. So they are actually very noble and brave creatures, which is probably why they were on medieval heraldry. But I've rather decided to keep the themes, to keep them thematically similar. So I decided when I do a second issue of Inkapade, that I am going to include it then. And then the last goal I'm looking at is to start on the Snake Series 2, which will be introducing an actual supervillain. The guy in the first series wasn't actually supervillain per se. He doesn't necessarily have any powers, but the guy in the new series will be. It's going to be a character called Coach Whip. So keeping with a snake theme, that's another type of snake. So if you've ever seen a Coach Whip, they can be pretty freaky. They actually pop their heads up and they run on the back of their tails, and they're quick. And they're called Coach Whips because they kind of look like a coach whip, But that should be a fun story. That's already all planned out. Not all of it is written, but most of it is planned out, so I'm hoping to get on that probably this fall is what I'm hoping to do. And of course, again, work on these videos or audio videos. They're not really videos per se. Well, I guess they are videos, but more audio than video. But podcasting sounds so pretentious. Yeah, anything which tries to get the comics out there, I'm willing to try and do. Selfish self-promotion. Yeah. So again, shout out to CircWorks for throwing this idea around. Thanks a whole lot. Sincerely, thanks a whole lot. And I'll be trying to accomplish those goals in the near future. Put out one video a month on comic strip reviews and maybe a few others depending on what strikes me. Work on Retropolis, getting that colored. Work on getting the first issue of Inkapade out. Work on finishing up the Holy Hunchback series, and then starting the Snake series too. So if anybody has any interest in these and would like to hold me accountable to them, I would most greatly appreciate it. So this is Jacob Carter at Cottonclad Comics, and I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hopefully producing something y'all will enjoy. Certainly I enjoy creating it. So thanks again. Bye.